It all began on a cold, mist-covered morning in the high-altitude border region of Kashmir. Snow had fallen the night before, blanketing the ridges and valleys in deceptive silence. But above that silence, 30,000 feet in the air, a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone silently patrolled the skies, its sensors scanning for unusual activity, its infrared cameras glowing softly as it collected classified surveillance data. At exactly 5:47 a.m. local time, the drone's feed went black. U.S. Air Force analysts monitoring the mission from a base in Qatar scrambled to regain control. For 7 minutes, they tried to reconnect. Then came the chilling confirmation. The drone was no longer responding. It had been hit. Within the hour, satellite imagery picked up scattered debris falling into the rugged valleys, just miles from the India-Pakistan line of control. The Pentagon didn't issue a statement right away. Instead, the incident was quietly logged, flagged as potential hostile engagement, and routed to the Situation Room in Washington. But secrets like that don't stay quiet for long. By noon, Pakistani media was ablaze. Flashing red banners on television screens declared that Indian jets had violated Pakistani airspace and targeted a sensitive convoy in the Neelam Valley. Anchors shouted into microphones. Analysts claimed it was a clear act of war. Grainy cell phone videos appeared, showing explosions, columns of smoke, and civilians running for cover. Whether the videos were from that morning or years ago didn't matter. Perception had taken root. The Pakistani military responded with swift retaliation. By evening, artillery batteries along the loch began shelling suspected Indian positions. Shells lit up the sky as terrified villagers fled to underground bunkers. India, caught off guard but unwilling to appear weak, scrambled MiG-29s and Rafales from bases in Pathankot and Srinagar. They didn't cross the loch, but they flew close, dangerously close. That night, Indian news channels painted a different picture. They claimed the Pakistani convoy was, in fact, moving weapons illegally across the border. They suggested the U.S. drone might have been mistaken for an enemy aircraft by Pakistani forces themselves. A former air marshal went on live television and declared, "India does not need to hide. If we strike, we'll own it." This is misinformation warfare. But while the regional media stoked nationalistic flames on both sides, the real tension was brewing across the globe. In Washington, D.C., inside the White House Situation Room, the president sat at the head of a long oak table, flanked by advisors, generals, and intelligence chiefs. A digital map of South Asia glowed on the screen behind them. The photos were laid out. Grainy thermal shots, coordinates, timelines. "Mr. President," began the CIA director, "we lost visual contact with the drone exactly 3 seconds before a heat signature consistent with a missile strike was detected. This image here," she pointed to a blown-up infrared frame, "shows a formation of what appears to be 2 Indian Su-30s within striking distance at the moment the drone went dark." "Did they fire?" the president asked. "We can't say definitively," she admitted, "but the proximity and timing make them our prime suspects." The president leaned back, tension etched across his face. "We have troops in the region. We have alliances. And if an ally takes down one of our drones, intentionally or not, we cannot sit quietly." The Secretary of State interjected. "India is denying involvement. Their official statement says their jets were responding to Pakistani shelling, nothing more." "Denying doesn't make it untrue," growled the Secretary of Defense. "And Pakistan is calling for international condemnation. They're already mobilizing in the south." "Then we'd better act before this spirals out of control," the president said firmly. By midnight, the U.S. had issued a formal diplomatic warning to India, demanding a transparent investigation and holding India accountable for the increasing instability in the region. That phrasing sent shockwaves through New Delhi. For decades, the U.S. and India had grown closer, militarily, economically, even strategically, and this statement felt like betrayal. In India, Prime Minister Virat Deshmukh held an emergency cabinet meeting. "The Americans are being played," he warned. "Someone is feeding them bad intelligence. We didn't touch that drone." But the evidence, however circumstantial, was already shaping global opinion. NATO allies were concerned. China, never missing a chance to stir regional tension, issued a statement calling for India's aggression to be reined in. Pakistan placed its nuclear forces on alert, and India responded in kind. Back in Washington, the president faced mounting pressure from Congress. Some called for sanctions. Others pushed for a hardline military stance. "If we don't respond, we look weak," barked one senator during a televised committee hearing. And weakness invites war. Meanwhile, online conspiracy theories flourished. Was it an inside job? Was a third country manipulating the crisis? Had China hacked the drone? Had rogue factions in Pakistan staged a convoy attack? No one had answers, only fear. Within just 24 hours, the world teetered on the edge of a three-way confrontation. Three nuclear powers, each armed, angry, and surrounded by misinformation, were now locked in a standoff that no one truly understood. And while leaders argued and diplomats scrambled, a single truth began to take shape behind the scenes. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a setup. While the world focused on missiles, war games, and press conferences, the real story was hidden deep inside a dimly lit server room in New Delhi, where a low-ranking intelligence analyst named Kavita Iyer noticed something that no one else did. Kavita wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that server. She was technically on leave. Her mother had just undergone surgery, and she was expected to be home. But Kavita was known for her obsession with data patterns, a skill that had made her both respected and feared within RAW, India's external intelligence agency. On that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She'd seen the surveillance images of the U.S. drone's last moments, the heat signatures, the jet paths, the signal interruptions. It was all too perfect, too clean. Military operations are rarely neat. This one was wrapped in precision, like a perfectly staged play. Sitting alone at her desk after hours, Kavita entered her credentials, but the files she needed were restricted. She frowned. These weren't just high-level. These were above her clearance. But she had something others didn't. A clearance override code, one she discovered months ago during a cyber audit. She had never used it. Until now. With a deep breath, she keyed it in. The system hesitated, then unlocked. Line by line, she poured through encrypted data logs, packet transfers, and transmission routes from the drone's final flight. What she found didn't make sense. Satellite data packets had been rerouted through non-standard relays. Specifically, a relay based in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, nowhere near any official U.S., Indian, or Pakistani communication hubs. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The deeper she went, the more disturbing the anomalies became. Signal echoes from Russian-made satellites, timestamp files that had been manipulated, command pings that should have originated in California, but instead had come from servers bouncing across Bulgaria and then to a dark web node in Istanbul. "This isn't an accident," she whispered. Then came the final confirmation, a digital fingerprint, a unique encryption key buried in the metadata of one of the manipulated drone feed segments. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Kavita had seen it before during an international cybersecurity drill the year prior. It was the signature of the Caligo Protocol, a clandestine rogue network believed to be a splinter faction made up of ex-intelligence operatives from Europe and Central Asia. Officially, they didn't exist. Unofficially, they were whispered about in cyber warfare circles as specialists in manufacturing chaos, a group that thrived on destabilization, conflict, and the black market profits of war. She sat back in her chair, stunned. Whoever had done this had planted false data into satellite relays, manipulated drone command logs, and fed both India and Pakistan a lie, all while making it look like the other side was guilty. Their goal wasn't a simple skirmish. It was nuclear chaos. Kavita knew she couldn't take this up the chain. Not yet. If Caligo had compromised systems this deeply, there was no telling who might be feeding them intel from the inside. She needed someone she could trust. Quietly, she copied the data onto a secure flash drive, encrypted it 3 ways, and slipped it into the lining of her coat. Then she walked straight out of RAW headquarters, past the armed guards, past the biometric gates, and into the cold night air of New Delhi, heart racing, fully aware that if anyone had seen what she just accessed, her life could be over. She made her way to an abandoned university computer lab across town, one she'd used during her student days, a place where she could operate off-grid. But she wasn't the only one watching. Across the globe in Berlin, a man known only as Gregor leaned back in a leather chair inside a private intelligence firm disguised as a tech startup. His team had just been alerted by an automated signal. Someone had tripped the dead code embedded in the forged satellite logs. His face hardened. "Who is she?" he asked his analyst. "Name is Kavita Iyer. Intelligence grade, level 3. Analyst. India." Gregor turned to the window, the lights of the city reflecting off the glass. "She's not supposed to know anything. Fix it." "Should we eliminate?" "Not yet," Gregor said coolly. "Let's watch. Sometimes the best bait is the one that thinks it's ahead." Meanwhile, Kavita sent an encrypted message to the only person outside her country who might believe her, Ethan Cross, an American investigative journalist and former intelligence liaison, someone with a reputation for exposing ugly truths governments preferred to keep buried. Her message was simple. "Ethan, it wasn't us. I have proof. Need secure line. They're watching." She hit send, and in that moment the game changed. This wasn't just about India and Pakistan anymore. It wasn't even about the drone. This was a global operation, a digital false flag meant to manipulate nuclear nations into obliterating one another. But now someone knew the truth, and someone else was hunting her for it. By the 5th day, the world teetered on the edge of full-scale war. Across India, columns of Arjun tanks and BrahMos missile systems were seen moving under heavy security toward the Rajasthan border, dust clouds trailing behind them like omens. Civilians filmed them from roadside dhabas and overpasses, their voices shaking as they whispered, "It's happening. We're going to war." In Pakistan, air raid sirens blared in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. The Pakistan Air Force scrambled its JF-17 Thunderjets and placed its nuclear-capable missiles on strategic readiness. Lines of volunteers formed outside military recruitment centers, patriotic songs playing over loudspeakers as the country braced for the worst. But this time, it wasn't just the subcontinent. The United States, now unsure which ally to trust, deployed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups into the Arabian Sea. The USS Eisenhower and USS Roosevelt sliced through the waters, with thousands of troops on board, flanked by submarines and destroyers. The message was clear. America would not sit on the sidelines. Skirmishes had already begun. An Indian patrol had been ambushed near Poonch. A Pakistani observation post had been destroyed in retaliatory fire. By nightfall, over 70 soldiers and civilians lay dead. Still, world leaders failed to issue a joint statement. They were paralyzed, each side drowning in manipulated intelligence and mistrust. Meanwhile, social media ignited like wildfire. Hashtags like hashtag Indo-Pak War, hashtag WW3, and hashtag Nuclear Countdown surged to the top of global trends. TikTokers posted maps predicting blast zones. Twitter users shared fake missile videos. A deepfake of India's prime minister declaring war briefly went viral before it was debunked, but not before millions had already believed it. Across London, New York, and Toronto, tension spilled into the streets. Diaspora communities, already on edge, clashed during protests. In Toronto, a peaceful candlelight vigil turned violent when rival demonstrators hurled bricks and slogans. Police forces struggled to keep up. The media didn't help. CNN aired a segment titled, "Are we 3 minutes from midnight?" referencing the symbolic doomsday clock. The broadcast included chilling simulations of nuclear fallout, targeting models, and expert panels who, despite their reassurances, couldn't hide the panic in their eyes. All the while, Kavita Iyer was running out of time. She hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. Her encrypted message had reached Ethan Cross, and he had replied, "Kavita, I believe you. I've seen chatter that doesn't add up. I'll meet you in Dubai. 24 hours. Stay dark. They're scrubbing logs." With her flash drive hidden in her bra and a fake ID tucked into her boot, Kavita slipped through the chaos at Indira Gandhi International Airport. Soldiers patrolled the terminal. Flight schedules changed by the hour. Several international flights had already been grounded due to security threats. But she managed to board a flight to Dubai, heart pounding, constantly scanning the terminal for anyone watching her. Halfway through the flight, the plane hit turbulence. Passengers screamed. Kavita gripped her seat, not because of the jolt, but because her mind raced with what might happen next. If she failed, the world wouldn't just fall into war. It would fall into war based on a lie. In Dubai, Ethan was already waiting. He wore a baseball cap low over his eyes and looked more like a tourist than a journalist. But his eyes were sharp, focused. "You brought it?" he asked. She nodded. He led her to a safe house inside a nondescript business park, where former intelligence contacts had rigged a makeshift server lab. Kavita plugged in the drive, and the files began to load. Ethan whistled. This is big. This isn't just manipulation. This is orchestrated chaos. Someone wanted India, Pakistan, and the U.S. at each other's throats, and they almost pulled it off. Outside, news alerts pinged on both their phones. Breaking, Pakistani submarine detected 150 miles off Indian coast. India places all nuclear sites on code red. They looked at each other. "We're running out of time," Ethan said grimly. With tensions escalating by the hour, Kavita Iyer, now in hiding in Dubai, knew she couldn't stop a war alone. That's when she reached out to the only man who might believe her, Ethan Cross, the American investigative journalist with a history of blowing the lid off covert military scandals. But as it turned out, she wasn't the only one connecting the digital dots. Thousands of miles away in Lahore, Amir Faraz, a Pakistani cybersecurity analyst working in the shadows of the government, was staring at a screen filled with glitches. Amir wasn't officially on the drone case. He was monitoring international cyber traffic for the Pakistani Defense Ministry. But something caught his eye. A strange signal loop that seemed to mimic NATO satellites, rerouting transmissions through non-existent servers. He flagged it. His supervisor told him to drop it. He didn't. Instead, Amir began digging, quietly building a case on his private server. He traced packet trails that led to Eastern Europe, mimicked signatures from Indian defense satellites, and discovered forged time-stamped orders that had supposedly been signed by Pakistani generals, orders they never actually issued. At first, he thought it was just a cyber espionage tactic, but when Pakistan's military placed its nuclear arsenal on emergency standby, Amir realized the stakes were far higher. Through a network of anonymous tech forums and whistleblower sites, Amir came across encrypted chatter. Someone else had noticed the same inconsistencies. A handle named Veritas72 had posted code fragments Amir recognized from the altered satellite logs. It was Kavita. Using a VPN, Amir messaged her. "You saw it too. I can prove these signatures are fake. This isn't war, it's a setup." Startled but desperate, Kavita responded cautiously. After some back and forth, they verified each other's data. Then, she introduced him to Ethan. And just like that, a tri-nation alliance was born. One journalist, one Indian analyst, one Pakistani hacker. Enemies on paper, but united by a single goal: prevent a war based on lies. They called themselves Trident. Their strategy was simple: expose the forgery to the world before the first missile launch. The challenge: doing it without getting killed. Amir used his skills to breach a private server belonging to a shell company in Geneva, the same one that had funneled satellite codes to both Indian and Pakistani systems. What he found chilled him: a schedule, with time blocks labeled Incident 5, Escalation Step 3, and finally, Final Strike Authorization. The files were dated just 2 days ahead. "This isn't just manipulation," Amir messaged. "It's a countdown." Meanwhile, Ethan leveraged his contacts in the intelligence and media worlds, trying to convince someone, anyone, to publish the story. But each door closed faster than the last. "I've never seen them so scared," Ethan told Kavita. "Somebody powerful is running this, and they're watching us." That's what happened. Their encrypted group chat, once invisible, flashed red. Amir's home server had been breached. In real time, they watched as folders were wiped, backups corrupted, trackers deployed. "They found us," Amir said, his voice tight over the secure call. Ethan went dark, moving to another safe house. Kavita had to switch SIM cards and change locations twice in one night. Her fake passport wouldn't last long. Time was running out. So was their digital safety net. And whoever was behind this, Caligo or someone worse, had just declared war on the truth. They were getting too close. After Kavita's last encrypted message to Ethan and Amir, a silent order was triggered, not through official military channels, but through an encrypted darknet marketplace reserved for Black Ops contracts. The name on the file, Kavita Iyer. Status, eliminate. The man chosen for the task was Raheel, a former Pakistani Special Forces operative turned international mercenary. His track record was flawless. Assassinations in Yemen, sabotage in Belarus, and 3 quiet disappearances in Mumbai that never made the news. Raheel wasn't just a killer, he was a ghost. His mission, find Kavita before she could leak her data to the public. By the time Kavita landed back in New Delhi, she knew she was being hunted. She had changed phones twice already, and her movements were erratic. She never used the same transport twice. Still, she could feel eyes on her. She headed to the one place she still trusted, the underground tech district in Nehru Place, a labyrinth of electronics markets, hacker dens, and rogue coders. She wore a shawl low over her face and moved quickly through the tight alleyways. Neon signs buzzed overhead. The city roared above, but down here, everything was wires, whispers, and danger. She ducked into an old cyber cafe run by a friend from her university days, Irvind, now a black hat for hire. He didn't ask questions, just handed her a rig burner phone and slipped her a packet of forged travel papers. "They're coming for you, aren't they?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Ethan Cross stepped out of his apartment to grab a coffee and vanished. He woke up hours later in a cold warehouse, tied to a steel chair. 2 men in black suits sat across from him. One flashed a badge, Homeland Security. But something was off. They didn't follow protocol. No Miranda rights. No official paperwork. And their questions weren't about terrorism or espionage. They were all about Kavita. Who was she? Where was the data? Had they gone public? Ethan, ever the investigator, stalled, played dumb. But he took mental notes. One of them had a Russian-made pistol. Homeland Security didn't carry those. These men weren't federal agents. They were contractors, hired muscle. And that meant someone very powerful and very scared had just broken protocol to keep the story buried. Back in Delhi, Raheel finally spotted Kavita exiting a side alley. He didn't hesitate. He followed, silent and deadly, hand brushing the grip of his suppressed pistol. But Kavita had one last trick. She ducked into a side corridor, pulled the rig burner phone from her pocket, and activated its self-destruct function. A loud pop, smoke, confusion. In the chaos, she slipped into a maintenance tunnel, vanishing into the underbelly of the city. She didn't have much time left. Neither did the world. The world stood on the brink. India had declared full combat readiness. Pakistan's missile silos were prepped and fueled. The U.S. Navy's 2 aircraft carriers had taken positions in the Arabian Sea with their jets already on deck. Across every major global city, citizens watched the news in silent terror. It was supposed to be a war no one wanted, but no one could stop. In a hidden safe house on the outskirts of New Delhi, Kavita and Amir sat hunched over a makeshift workstation, a battered laptop, several external drives, and a tangled mess of wires. The clock was ticking. Satellite feeds showed military convoys already moving. Reports indicated Indian jets were preparing for a potential first strike. But Kavita had something more powerful than any weapon, the truth. She and Amir had been racing against time to decrypt the final layer of files Amir had pulled from the Geneva shell server. These files were heavily encrypted, protected by an AI-assisted firewall that auto-scrambled every attempt to break it. But Kavita, brilliant, stubborn, and relentless, found a loophole. She piggybacked on the system's internal error correction mechanism and exposed the final layer. It worked, and what they saw confirmed their worst fears. Inside the decrypted files were detailed operation logs, complete with timestamp directives, digital trails, and metadata. The orchestrators of the war were not state actors. They were part of a covert European think tank-turned-paramilitary syndicate calling themselves Caligo, Latin for darkness. Their motive, destabilized global power structures to create a reset that favored private technocracies over traditional governments. They had used deepfake orders, manipulated military signals, and AI-generated communications to pit India, Pakistan, and the U.S. against one another. It was the ultimate false flag, one that nearly succeeded. The files included voice recordings of synthetic military orders, images of planted evidence, and a real-time log showing how the drone's course had been diverted remotely, not by India or Pakistan, but by a rogue satellite system leased under a false identity in Luxembourg. This is it, Amir whispered. Proof. They caused everything. Kavita nodded. We can't give this to any government. We go straight to the people. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Ethan Cross had escaped his captors with help from an unexpected ally, a former NSA analyst turned whistleblower who had been tracking Caligo for years. Together, they set up a secure server and contacted Kavita via a backdoor she had created in their encrypted chat system. It was time. Kavita uploaded the entire Caligo archive, over 2.4 terabytes of raw data, communications, and decryptions, to Ethan's secure drive. Ethan crafted the headline himself. The war was a lie, evidence of sabotage by unknown third party revealed. He hit publish, and the world changed. Within 10 minutes, the story was trending across every platform. Hashtag the lie and hashtag stop the war took over social media. Major networks interrupted broadcasts. Hacker groups from around the world began mirroring and amplifying the leak. WikiLeaks, Anonymous, and even former intelligence officials authenticated the files in real time. The public outrage was immediate and global. Indian and Pakistani citizens took to the streets, not in war cries, but in protest. Soldiers in both nations began questioning orders. A Pakistani general refused to authorize a missile launch, citing the leak. An Indian air marshal delayed a planned airstrike, pending further verification. Even the White House, caught off guard, announced an emergency review of intelligence data and ordered a temporary stand down. Kavita, Amir, and Ethan watched it unfold from their scattered locations, breathless, anxious, but hopeful. Did we do it? Amir asked quietly. Kavita stared at the screen. The world was reacting faster than she'd hoped. Faster than Caligo could stop it. We bought time, she said. Now let's make it count. But she knew it wasn't over, because somewhere in a boardroom in Europe, the architects of chaos were already planning their next move. And this time, they knew who had exposed them. For the first time in days, the world exhaled. The engines of Indian fighter jets quieted. Pakistani missile launch systems were powered down, and the twin U.S. aircraft carriers in the Arabian Sea began a slow, deliberate retreat. But this wasn't because of any official ceasefire treaty or a brokered back-channel deal. It was the truth, broadcast, undeniable, and viral, that stopped the war. The orders that never came in New Delhi. General Prakash Sharma of the Indian Armed Forces stood at the command center, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the blinking monitor, showing true positions along the Rajasthan border. His aides rushed in with the latest intelligence report, U.S. satellite confirmation that the drone incident was fabricated. Attached was the decrypted file archive from the Caligo leak. The general scanned the documents. His jaw tightened. He turned to his second in command. Stand down the strike units. All of them. Sir, that contradicts direct orders from. I know what it contradicts. Sharma cut in. But the enemy isn't Pakistan. Not today. Miles away in Rawalpindi, General Asif Mirza received a similar report. Caligo's involvement had been confirmed by U.S. Cyber Command and endorsed by Pakistan's own intelligence verification units. He looked over the images, AI-generated orders, spoofed GPS data, deepfake messages supposedly from Indian officials. We were played, Mirza muttered. His voice echoed across the silent war room. Pull back our squadrons. Notify command. Any officer who issues a launch without written confirmation from my hand is to be relieved immediately. It wasn't just a military decision now. It was a moral reckoning. The streets rise in Mumbai, Islamabad, Lahore, and Delhi. Citizens flooded the streets, holding signs that read "No more lies. We want peace." And Caligo equals war profiteers. Muslims and Hindus marched side by side. Soldiers off-duty joined arms with students. Mothers held children close, their voices louder than the war drums. In Karachi, protesters climbed onto military trucks, waving white flags and chanting, "Ye Yung Nahi Hogi." This war will not happen. In New York, London, Toronto, and Dubai, diaspora communities clashed in debate. But this time, not over blame, but over justice. The world had united not in retaliation, but in resistance, against manipulation, against war, and against those who profited from it. The press conference that changed everything then came a moment no one thought possible. In Geneva, under the eyes of the world, Indian Foreign Minister Ananya Deshmukh, Pakistani Foreign Secretary Zubair Haqqani, and U.S. Secretary of State Elizabeth Rowe stood shoulder to shoulder behind a single podium. "This was almost the end of us," Deshmukh began, her voice steady but raw. But the truth, uncovered by a brave few, saved millions. Haqqani added, "We were seconds away from war, but we've discovered the true enemy, those who wish to see us divided for their gain." Secretary Rowe stepped forward. "Let this moment stand as a warning and a commitment. We will pursue Caligo. We will hold the architects of this deception accountable." Reporters shouted questions. Who was funding Caligo? Would there be arrests? Could it happen again? None of the diplomats had all the answers. But the symbolism of that stage, three historic adversaries standing together, not in confrontation but in solidarity, was more powerful than any statement they gave. The real standoff in private, intelligence agencies around the world were still scrambling. Caligo hadn't vanished. Several of their agents had gone dark, their servers wiped. This wasn't over. It was a new kind of war, digital, ideological, borderless. And though no missiles had launched, no cities had been flattened, the scars of what almost happened would remain etched in the collective memory of a generation. But for now, the world stood still, not in fear, but in defiance of fear. And somewhere, watching quietly, Kavita, Amir, and Ethan knew they had altered the course of history. But they also knew the next battle was coming. In the weeks that followed the near war, the world shifted from panic to purpose. The Caligo files, what the global media had dubbed the decrypted data leak, sent shockwaves through intelligence communities. Governments from Berlin to Beijing scrambled to reassess every assumption, every alliance. But beyond the headlines and press conferences, a newly formed international task force was already moving in silence. Its name, Task Force Helix, led jointly by cyber intelligence agents from the U.S., India, and Pakistan. Helix was built to hunt one target, the global chaos syndicate responsible for almost starting World War III. What they discovered was more terrifying than even the most paranoid intelligence theorist could have imagined. An empire built on anarchy. The group wasn't new. It had roots stretching back to the post-Cold War era, when Black Ops operatives, disillusioned generals, and disbanded intelligence officers were cut loose from their governments. With no allegiance but to power and profit, they evolved into a network without a name, a flag, or a conscience. They called themselves Caligo, Latin for darkness. Fitting, since their greatest weapon was chaos itself. Membership included a disavowed CIA spymaster, once nicknamed the Architect, who specialized in psychological warfare and nation disruption strategies. A Russian oligarch turned crypto baron, who laundered money through blockchain networks and funded coups with digital currency. A former Indian intelligence officer, presumed dead after a failed mission in 2008, now reborn as Karna, the tech mind behind Caligo's AI deception tools. A network of mercenaries, ex-Delta Force, GRU, and ISI operatives, who offered muscle where manipulation wasn't enough. And perhaps most chilling, a pair of tech billionaires from the West, whose empires were built on social media and surveillance technology. They didn't just sell data. They used it to engineer unrest, to push false narratives, to divide. Caligo's business model was simple: destabilize, profit, repeat. Wherever they could spark confusion and conflict, they bet against markets, supplied black market arms, and offered cyber support to governments willing to pay for intelligence rigging. Civil wars, coups d'etats, even major elections, All had the fingerprints of Caligo's operations buried somewhere deep beneath the surface. But this latest operation? It had been their masterpiece. The plan to rewrite borders. Caligo had carefully selected India, Pakistan, and the U.S. for one reason: nuclear volatility combined with political mistrust. If they could push even two of the three into full-scale conflict, global stability would collapse. Economic systems would spiral. Nations would realign. And in that chaos, Caligo would cash in. Their ultimate goal was something called Project Reset, a detailed blueprint recovered by Task Force Helix during a raid on a Caligo safe house in Zurich. Project Reset wasn't just a plan to trigger war. It was a manifesto. Inside were strategic redrawing maps of Asia and Europe, predictions of regime collapses, and algorithms designed to exploit internet outrage and nationalism through targeted disinformation. Caligo didn't just want war. They wanted to remake the world in their image, one without rules, only influence. The power of truth, but they hadn't accounted for one thing. Not governments, not armies. Three people: a journalist, a hacker, and a spy. Ethan Cross's publication of the Caligo files was the beginning. But the public's reaction, the refusal to be manipulated, the protests, the bipartisan call for peace, was what truly exposed the syndicate. For the first time, Caligo's hand had been forced into the light. Their hidden servers went offline. Several shell companies were abandoned overnight. Some of their key operatives vanished. Others were arrested in quiet, off-the-record takedowns in cities like Istanbul, Singapore, and Johannesburg. Interpol released an international warrant for over a dozen suspected Caligo agents. Anonymous joined forces with whistleblowers to expose more hidden nodes of the network. Cyber experts from MIT to Mumbai offered help decoding fragments of Caligo's communication code. It was a digital manhunt unlike any in history. And still, Task Force Helix knew. They had only scratched the surface. New rules for a new world in a rare address to the UN Security Council, the Secretary-General declared. We now live in an era where war can be launched not by tanks, but by terminals. Not by soldiers, but by scripts of code. The enemy is no longer only those across our borders. It is those who would make us believe the wrong ones are our enemies. That statement became a rallying cry. In response to the Caligo revelation, several nations signed the Geneva Cyber Accords, a treaty outlining protocols for cyber warfare, AI deception, and international manipulation. While not perfect, it was a start, a declaration that truth mattered, and that new wars would require new weapons of defense: transparency, cooperation, and vigilance. Kavita, now under protective identity, consulted quietly with international security councils. Amir was recruited by Pakistan's cyber division to help build its new cyber ethics unit. Ethan's reputation soared, though he turned down every book deal and award, saying only, "I didn't save the world. We just stopped it from ending this time." But they knew one thing: Caligo wasn't gone. It was only bleeding, regrouping, watching. Because for every truth that gets exposed, there are 100 more being whispered in the shadows. And as the world celebrated its narrow escape from nuclear disaster, Kavita sat in a quiet room, watching a flickering screen. A message appeared from an unknown source. "You won this round, but the game is far from over." She stared at it for a long moment before replying. "Good. We're just getting started." They were getting too close. After Kavita's last encrypted message to Ethan and Amir, a silent order was triggered, not through official military channels, but through an encrypted darknet marketplace reserved for Black Ops contracts. The name on the file, Kavita Iyer. Status: eliminate. The man chosen for the task was Raheel, a former Pakistani Special Forces operative turned international mercenary. His track record was flawless: assassinations in Yemen, sabotage in Belarus, and 3 quiet disappearances in Mumbai that never made the news. Raheel wasn't just a killer, he was a ghost. His mission: find Kavita before she could leak her data to the public. By the time Kavita landed back in New Delhi, she knew she was being hunted. She had changed phones twice already, and her movements were erratic. She never used the same transport twice. Still, she could feel eyes on her. She headed to the one place she still trusted: the underground tech district in Nehru Place, a labyrinth of electronics markets, hacker dens, and rogue coders. She wore a shawl low over her face and moved quickly through the tight alleyways. Neon signs buzzed overhead. The city roared above, but down here, everything was wires, whispers, and danger. She ducked into an old cyber cafe run by a friend from her university days, Irvin, now a black hat for hire. He didn't ask questions, just handed her a rig burner phone and slipped her a packet of forged travel papers. "They're coming for you, aren't they?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Ethan Cross stepped out of his apartment to grab a coffee and vanished. He woke up hours later in a cold warehouse, tied to a steel chair. Two men in black suits sat across from him. One flashed a badge, Homeland Security. But something was off. They didn't follow protocol. No Miranda rights. No official paperwork. And their questions weren't about terrorism or espionage. They were all about Kavita. Who was she? Where was the data? Had they gone public? Ethan, ever the investigator, stalled, played dumb. But he took mental notes. One of them had a Russian-made pistol. Homeland Security didn't carry those. These men weren't federal agents. They were contractors, hired muscle. And that meant someone very powerful and very scared had just broken protocol to keep the story buried. Back in Delhi, Raheel finally spotted Kavita exiting a side alley. He didn't hesitate. He followed, silent and deadly, hand brushing the grip of his suppressed pistol. But Kavita had one last trick. She ducked into a side corridor, pulled the rig burner phone from her pocket, and activated its self-destruct function. A loud pop, smoke, confusion. In the chaos, she slipped into a maintenance tunnel, vanishing into the underbelly of the city. She didn't have much time left. Neither did the world. The world stood on the brink. India had declared full combat readiness. Pakistan's missile silos were prepped and fueled. The U.S. Navy's 2 aircraft carriers had taken positions in the Arabian Sea with their jets already on deck. Across every major global city, citizens watched the news in silent terror. It was supposed to be a war no one wanted, but no one could stop. In a hidden safe house on the outskirts of New Delhi, Kavita and Amir sat hunched over a makeshift workstation, a battered laptop, several external drives, and a tangled mess of wires. The clock was ticking. Satellite feeds showed military convoys already moving. Reports indicated Indian jets were preparing for a potential first strike. But Kavita had something more powerful than any weapon: the truth. She and Amir had been racing against time to decrypt the final layer of files Amir had pulled from the Geneva shell server. These files were heavily encrypted, protected by an AI-assisted firewall that auto-scrambled every attempt to break it. But Kavita, brilliant, stubborn, and relentless, found a loophole. She piggybacked on the system's internal error correction mechanism and exposed the final layer. It worked, and what they saw confirmed their worst fears. Inside the decrypted files were detailed operation logs, complete with timestamped directives, digital trails, and metadata. The orchestrators of the war were not state actors. They were part of a covert European think tank-turned-paramilitary syndicate, calling themselves Caligo, Latin for darkness. Their motive: destabilize global power structures to create a reset that favored private technocracies over traditional governments. They had used deepfake orders, manipulated military signals, and AI-generated communications to pit India, Pakistan, and the U.S. against one another. It was the ultimate false flag, one that nearly succeeded. The files included voice recordings of synthetic military orders, images of planted evidence, and a real-time log showing how the drone's course had been diverted remotely, not by India or Pakistan, but by a rogue satellite system leased under a false identity in Luxembourg. This is it," Amir whispered. "Proof. They caused everything." Kavita nodded. "We can't give this to any government. We go straight to the people." Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Ethan Cross had escaped his captors with help from an unexpected ally, a former NSA analyst turned whistleblower who had been tracking Caligo for years. Together, they set up a secure server and contacted Kavita via a backdoor she had created in their encrypted chat system. It was time. Kavita uploaded the entire Caligo archive, over 2.4 terabytes of raw data, communications, and decryptions to Ethan's secure drive. Ethan crafted the headline himself. The war was a lie, evidence of sabotage by unknown third party revealed. He hit publish. And the world changed. Within 10 minutes, the story was trending across every platform. Hashtag the lie and hashtag stop the war took over social media. Major networks interrupted broadcasts. Hacker groups from around the world began mirroring and amplifying the leak. WikiLeaks, Anonymous, and even former intelligence officials authenticated the files in real time. The public outrage was immediate and global. Indian and Pakistani citizens took to the streets, not in war cries, but in protest. Soldiers in both nations began questioning orders. A Pakistani general refused to authorize a missile launch, citing the leak. An Indian air marshal delayed a planned airstrike, pending further verification. Even the White House, caught off guard, announced an emergency review of intelligence data and ordered a temporary stand down. Kavita, Amir, and Ethan watched it unfold from their scattered locations, breathless, anxious, but hopeful. Did we do it? Amir asked quietly. Kavita stared at the screen. The world was reacting faster than she'd hoped. Faster than Caligo could stop it. We bought time, she said. Now let's make it count. But she knew it wasn't over. Because somewhere in a boardroom in Europe, the architects of chaos were already planning their next move. And this time, they knew who had exposed them. Months passed, but the ripple effects of the Caligo incident still reverberated throughout the world. The initial tension that gripped India, Pakistan, and the United States had slowly given way to something far more enduring, a recognition that the cyber battlefield could no longer be ignored. The near war, and the efforts of Kavita, Amir, and Ethan had changed everything. The world had been pushed to the brink, and yet, it had also been pulled back from the precipice. It had learned a hard, invaluable lesson. Even in an era dominated by high-tech espionage, nuclear threats, and the digital manipulation of information, the true strength of a society still lay in the hands of its people. The truth seekers, the whistleblowers, the ones willing to put everything on the line for something greater than themselves. A new peace accord by the summer of the next year. India and Pakistan took a bold step. In a surprising turn of events, the two countries signed a new peace accord, an agreement brokered not by military strategists or political powerhouses, but by a quiet coalition of diplomats, peace activists, and, at its core, those who had exposed the truth. The negotiations were held in secret at a neutral site, a remote resort on the coast of the Maldives. There were no cameras, no media frenzy, just quiet discussions in high-security rooms, where seasoned diplomats met in person for the first time in years, without the weight of historical animosities. The peace accord, called the Maldives Protocol, became the bedrock of a new era for both countries. The terms were revolutionary. Demilitarized zones were established along the line of control, where both nations would share intelligence in real time, with international oversight to prevent any future escalations. A joint task force was formed to monitor and dismantle cyber operations that targeted national security or political stability, ensuring that no third party could interfere in their affairs. War memorials in both countries were created not to glorify past battles, but to honor the peacekeepers, both living and dead, who sacrificed their lives to stop the escalation of conflict. The announcement of the accord was greeted with disbelief by the world, especially considering that just months earlier, the two nations had been on the cusp of nuclear warfare. The international community watched in stunned silence as the leaders of both countries, under heavy scrutiny, signed their names to a document that, in many ways, was more about courage than diplomacy. A lesson for the world, the story of Kavita, Amir, and Ethan, three individuals who, against all odds, exposed the truth behind the cyber conspiracy, became a symbol of what is possible when people choose to fight for what's right, even in the most dangerous of circumstances. In the aftermath of the accord, the media spotlight moved on. But for the first time in history, a global conversation began to take root about the new power of truth. Governments began to realize that, in an age of manipulation, transparency was the greatest weapon they had. A new generation of heroes, inspired by the courage and determination of those who had exposed the truth. A new generation of young people rose to prominence. Hacktivists, journalists, and peace builders, who had once been on the margins of society, now found their voices in the mainstream. Schools began teaching digital literacy and ethics as essential subjects. A new wave of cybersecurity specialists, peace activists, and whistleblowers was born. In places like Silicon Valley, Hyderabad, and Warsaw, new grassroots organizations formed, groups dedicated to tackling the digital misinformation that had nearly torn the world apart. These organizations worked with governments, civil societies, and tech companies to ensure that the lessons of the Caligo incident were never forgotten. It only takes a few brave souls to stop the end of the world. This became a mantra that echoed through lectures, documentaries, and social media channels. It was a message that wasn't about war or power, but about the importance of standing up for the truth, even when the truth was buried beneath layers of lies. Global change over the next decade. The effects of the Maldives Protocol were felt far beyond the borders of India and Pakistan. The very nature of global politics shifted. Governments began to foster cross-border cooperation in ways that were unimaginable before. Nuclear powers found themselves working together more than ever before, not to wage war, but to create shared cyber defense systems. National intelligence agencies shared more data on cyber threats and disinformation campaigns, realizing that peace now had to be defended in cyberspace just as much as it had been on the ground.